Los Angeles, 1972, la ciudad de los sueños. But for James Carter, it felt more like a nightmare. James had spent 6 years chasing his dream of becoming an actor, but Hollywood was ruthless. Endless auditions, rejection after rejection, and nights spent sleeping in his car. He had come here with hopes of making it big, but now his pockets were empty, and his spirit was shattered. That evening, sitting alone in a dusty diner, James made a painful decision. He was done. Tomorrow he'd leave Hollywood behind. But then the door swung open, and in walked a man who seemed larger than life. Clint Eastwood. James froze. The legendary actor was standing right there, ordering a black coffee like he was just another guy. James had idolized Clint for years. The man was a symbol of resilience, toughness, and quiet strength. But what could a washed-up, nobody actor like James say to him? As James debated whether to approach him, fate made the decision for him. James had just enough cash for one last meal, but when he reached into his pocket, his wallet was gone. Panic set in. Had he dropped it? Had someone stolen it? The waitress was already heading his way. Embarrassment hit like a punch to the gut. Just as he opened his mouth to explain, a deep voice cut through the tension. "I got it." James turned. Clint Eastwood was looking right at him. James stammered, I can't let you do that, sir. Clint just slid a few bills onto the counter. Looks like you could use a break." The entire diner was watching. James hesitated, but finally muttered, "Thank you, Mr. Eastwood." Clint nodded. "Call me Clint." Clint grabbed his coffee and motioned for James to join him at his booth. James, still in shock, sat down. For a moment there was silence. Then Clint spoke. "Rough night?" James hesitated, but something about Clint's presence, the way he carried himself with quiet confidence, made him open up. "I moved here 6 years ago to be an actor. Thought I'd make something of myself. But Hollywood doesn't care about guys like me. I've tried everything, and I've got nothing to show for it. I'm leaving tomorrow." Clint took a sip of his coffee, studying him for a long moment. Then, in that slow, measured voice that had made him famous, he said something James would never forget. "You know why most people don't make it? Because they quit right before things get interesting." James blinked. "What do you mean?" Clint leaned in slightly. "This town breaks the weak, but the ones who survive? They're the ones who refuse to stay down. You've spent 6 years trying, and now you want to throw it all away?" James sighed. "I don't know what else to do." Clint smiled slightly. "Try one more time, and then one more after that." He leaned back, glancing out the window. "You know, when I started, I got rejected for years. They said my voice was too soft, my acting too wooden. I could have quit, but I didn't. I kept showing up, and one day someone gave me a shot." James could barely breathe. Clint Eastwood, the Clint Eastwood, had almost given up once too? Clint finished his coffee, stood up, and placed a napkin on the table. "You remind me of me when I started." James looked down. There was an address on the napkin. "Show up tomorrow at 6 a.m. I can't promise anything, but if you're serious about this, you'll be there." And then, without another word, Clint walked out. James sat frozen. Had that really just happened? This was his chance, a real chance. But could he do it? For a moment, doubt crept back in. Maybe Clint was just being kind. Maybe it was just another dead end. But then he thought about Clint's words. Try one more time. And then one more after that. The next morning, before the sun even rose, James was at that address. It turned out to be a small set where Clint was working on a new project. James didn't get a speaking role that day, but Clint gave him a small part as an extra, his first real job in Hollywood. That one opportunity led to another, and another. Over time, James worked his way up, eventually landing real roles. Years later, he became a respected character actor. Whenever people asked him how he got his start, James would just smile and say, "Because Clint Eastwood bought me a cup of coffee." Decades later, James sat in a restaurant when he overheard a young actor talking about quitting. He smiled, walked over, and said, "You know why most people don't make it? Because they quit right before things get interesting." The young actor looked up in surprise. James chuckled, tossing a few bills on the table. "Have a coffee and try one more time," because that's what Clint Eastwood had done for him. And sometimes one small act of kindness is all it takes to change a life.